I've always been good at being invisible. You don't grow up as a single mother of two, juggling work, school forms, lost socks, and last-minute science projects without mastering the art of slipping into the background. I'm not the woman people remember at parties. I'm the one who organized the RSVP list. And for the last 7 years, I've been Raphael Vana's shadow. He's the kind of man who walks into a room and bends it around him. Everything stops. People turn. He doesn't command attention. He owns it. Women whisper his name like it's a wish. And men treat him like a benchmark they'll never meet. I just make sure his coffee is hot. His meetings run smoothly. And no one realizes he double-booked 2 Botox appointments on the same afternoon. That's my real talent. Making chaos look organized while pretending I'm not exhausted. But today, he looked at me like I was visible. It started at the office late on a Friday. Everyone else had left for the weekend. My desk was a graveyard of half-drunk coffee and unopened snack bars. I was updating the calendar for next week when I heard his voice. "Helena, I need a favor." He never comes to me. Usually, I'm summoned, emailed, summoned again. But there he was in my doorway, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, his tie stuffed into a pocket like he'd lost the will to pretend he cared. A favor? I raised an eyebrow without looking up. Did your assistant forget how to schedule an Uber? He gave me that half smile. The one that makes nurses blush and patients spend thousands they don't have on me. It just bounced off. It's a little more personal. That got my attention. He walked in, sat in the chair across from mine, and said the most ridiculous sentence I'd ever heard. "I need you to pretend to be my ex-wife." I blinked, not in confusion, but in that slow, stunned way you do when your brain is actively rejecting reality. "You're what?" "My ex-wife," he repeated casually as if it was just another client mix-up. "It's complicated. There's a woman." "Of course there is. And I may have told her that I'm divorced. That I have a civilized relationship with my ex." She found it impressive. I leaned back in my chair. "So you lied." "That tracks." "I didn't lie. I expanded the truth temporarily." "And you want me to be the temporary expansion?" "Helena, you know everything about me. My habits, my schedule, my moods. You're the only person I trust to pull this off." I should have said no. I really should have. But I thought of my kids, of how tired I was of saying, "Not this month," every time they asked for something extra. I thought of the vacation I'd never taken. The life I kept postponing. So I said, "What's in it for me?" "Whatever you want," he said immediately. "A bonus, a weekend off, a trip, name it." He sounded desperate, and I couldn't help but be a little amused. Raphael Vani, plastic surgery royalty, brought down by a lie of his own making. "One weekend," I said. "My kids come too, and I'm not wearing heels." His relief was almost embarrassing. "Deal," he said. Then, as he stood up to leave, he paused at the door, glanced back at me, and said, "You'll need a dress. Red. Something unforgettable." I stared at him, completely thrown off by the seriousness in his voice. He didn't say it like a joke or a compliment. He said it like an instruction, like this mattered. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just trying to sell the lie to her. He wanted to believe it himself. Before we begin, a quick note. This video is a work of fiction intended for mature audiences. It contains suggestive themes and passionate storytelling designed for entertainment purposes only. There is no explicit content, violence, or real events depicted here. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're ready for a thrilling romantic tale, sit back and enjoy. The ceremony wasn't real, but the silence in the room was. I thought pretending to be Raphael's ex-wife would feel like theater. I imagined some low-effort charade where I stood by his side for a few awkward conversations, smiled politely, and got through it with a few jokes and a decent pair of shoes. Instead, I was being fitted into a carefully constructed lie tailored in silk and stitched with tension. The event was a charity gala in downtown Charleston, held in one of those sprawling antebellum mansions that smells like old money and even older secrets. Candlelight flickered against tall mirrors, and the air buzzed with quiet judgment. Everyone looked like they had already decided who I was before I even walked in. She must be the ex. She looks tired. Not his type. Poor thing. I could hear it all without a single word being spoken. I wore the red dress. The one Raphael said would be unforgettable. It was sleeveless, fitted just enough to feel daring, and I hadn't worn something like it in years. My daughter helped with my hair, and my son told me I looked like someone who didn't answer emails after 6 p.m. That was his highest form of praise. But the moment I stepped into the room, I felt like a spotlight had turned on me, and it wasn't kind. Raphael was already inside, surrounded by people who smiled with their teeth, but not their eyes. He looked impeccable, of course. His tuxedo fit like it had been tailored by angels. But when he saw me, he froze just for a second. Then he walked toward me, and the room seemed to shift around his footsteps. "You didn't say you were going to wear that," he whispered, stopping just a breath away. "And you didn't say you'd look at me like it was real," I replied, smiling like it didn't shake me to say it. His eyes lingered on mine a moment longer than they should have. Then he offered his arm. "Ready to play the part?" "Born ready," I lied. The evening unfolded in a blur of soft music, hushed conversations, and glasses clinking too politely. Raphael introduced me as Helena, his ex-wife and dear friend, and I smiled with teeth polished by years of keeping things together. We laughed when expected. We nodded when spoken to. And with each passing hour, the line between truth and performance blurred dangerously. I wasn't used to being looked at. Not like that. Not like a woman who had once been loved and then let go with grace. I was used to being useful, efficient, the woman behind the man. But here, I was his past, his regret, his proof of growth. And no one believed a word of it. Between conversations, I caught glimpses of myself in the mirrors. I didn't look like a woman he would have married. I looked like a woman who'd been holding her breath for 10 years, just remembered she had lungs. Then it happened. Across the ballroom, I saw my ex-husband. Of course, he was there. Charleston's social scene is an echo chamber, and he never misses an opportunity to remind people he traded up. He stood next to his fiancée, taller, thinner, shinier than I ever was. They looked like a magazine cover, and she looked like she didn't know how to laugh at anything that wasn't about someone else. He saw me, did a double take, and smirked. It was a small thing, barely a flicker, but it was the same smirk he gave me the day he moved out when he said, "You'll be fine. You always are." I felt it like a slap. Raphael saw it, too. He didn't say anything. He just moved closer, slid his hand around my waist, and leaned in like we were the kind of couple that had shared 1,000 mornings and still wanted 1,000 more. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "For what?" I whispered back, not trusting my voice. Then he kissed me. It was slow, warm, calculated, and entirely unexpected. I didn't kiss him back. Not really. But I didn't stop him either. When he pulled away, he didn't smile. He didn't explain. He just looked at me with something unreadable in his eyes, then led me out of the crowd like we were escaping something that had never happened. Once we were alone in the quiet hallway outside the ballroom, I turned to him. "That wasn't part of the deal," I said, trying to sound firm, not shaken. He didn't answer right away, just watched me like he was still trying to understand what he'd just done. "It worked, didn't it?" he finally said. It worked like I was just another tool in his perfectly curated narrative. But the worst part wasn't that he kissed me to prove a point. The worst part was that, for 1 second, it didn't feel fake. The car ride back to the house was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes after a good evening, but the kind that clings to your skin. Thick, humid, heavy with things that should have been said. Raphael sat beside me, one hand resting on the gearshift, the other casually brushing his lower lip like he was replaying the kiss in his mind. I stared out the window, watching Charleston blur past in golden streaks and shadows. Magnolia trees swayed in the warm night breeze, but I couldn't feel the beauty of it. Not when my pulse was still stumbling over itself. He hadn't said a word since we left the gala. Not about the kiss, not about the smirk from my ex. Not about anything. When we pulled into the long driveway of the rental house he'd booked, because of course he didn't just rent a hotel room but an entire historic home by the water, I felt the weight of the evening settle into my shoulders. It was beautiful. White columns, dark shutters, wide porches, a dream house from another life, too perfect for people pretending to be something they're not. Inside, the kids had already claimed their rooms. I could hear the muffled sound of them laughing about something on the second floor. And for a moment, I envied their ability to adapt so fast. For them, this was just a vacation. A strange one, maybe, but one with snacks and a massive bathtub, so who cared? Raphael poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one without looking at me. To surviving the circus, he said, raising his glass. Is that what it was? I asked, taking a sip. My hand was steadier than I expected. My heart wasn't. He didn't answer. Just sat down on the edge of the couch, unbuttoned the top of his shirt, and loosened his tie like the night had finally caught up with him. Do you do that often? I asked, surprising myself. Do what? Use people. He looked up, sharp, but not defensive. No, he said. Not like this. I didn't know whether to believe him. The truth is, I didn't know Raphael at all. Not really. I knew his coffee order, his favorite surgical instruments, his schedule, his routine, but not him. Not the version of him who kisses a woman in public just to win a game. He stood up, took a deep breath, and walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Softer now, he said quietly. Tired. I panicked. When I saw your ex, the way he looked at you, I just reacted. I let that hang in the air. Not an apology. Not really, but maybe the closest thing he was capable of. Well, I said, setting my glass down. It worked. He probably thinks I married up. Raphael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You should go to bed, he said after a moment. I'll take the downstairs guest room. I nodded and turned to leave, but then I paused at the foot of the staircase. Raphael, I said without looking back. He waited. Don't do that again. Not unless you mean it. There was a beat of silence behind me. I don't know what I meant, he admitted. Upstairs, I found the room he'd prepared for me. Bright, elegant, untouched. Everything was in its place. Crisp linens, folded towels, a small vase of fresh flowers on the nightstand. He thought of everything except how it would feel to be me in this house. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at myself in the mirror. The makeup was still perfect, the dress still flawless. I looked like a woman who belonged in that ballroom. But inside, I felt like someone who had wandered into the wrong life and decided to stay out of sheer curiosity. The worst part was how easy it was to pretend. I could have stayed in that moment forever, being looked at like I mattered, like I was beautiful, like I had been loved once. But the dress would come off. The makeup would wash away. And in the morning, I'd still be the woman who fixed his calendar, the woman he kissed like a performance, the woman who told herself it didn't matter. I lay down facing the window. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like it was trying to say something. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was lonely. Maybe, just maybe, I wanted it to be real more than I was willing to admit. I woke up to the sound of bacon, not the sizzling, joyful kind that means someone made breakfast out of love. The kind that says someone is trying too hard. Downstairs, the house smelled like a southern diner. Eggs, toast, coffee. It was too much, too early, and too unfamiliar. I pulled on a robe, padded down the stairs barefoot, and found Raphael in the kitchen cooking. Actually cooking, and not like a man who knows what he's doing. more like someone following a YouTube video on 1.5x speed. "Are you wearing an apron?" I asked, blinking. He looked up, startled. His hair was still a little damp from the shower, and he had flour on his cheek. The apron said, "Kiss the cook," which made me question everything. "It was in the drawer," he muttered. I panicked. I bit back a laugh. "That seems to be a pattern with you." He handed me a cup of coffee without looking at me. It was the way I like it. Just the right amount of milk, no sugar, no questions asked. "You remembered?" I said, surprised. He didn't reply, just turned back to the stove like we hadn't shared a kiss that haunted us both. The kids wandered in next, sleepy-eyed and delighted to find a table full of food. My son immediately grabbed a pancake and asked if Raphael had a PS5. Raphael blinked. "What?" And that was how he ended up on the couch, a controller in his hand, getting annihilated in a racing game by a 12-year-old who had no mercy and zero respect for his surgical precision. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, trying not to let it get to me. The sight of Raphael, who once corrected a nurse for using the wrong brand of gauze, now laughing as my son screamed, "You're in 5th place, dude." He was different. Or maybe he was just relaxed. Maybe without the white coat, the marble office, and the curated dating life, he was just a man trying to remember how to be one. Later that day, we went into town. The kids wanted ice cream and Raphael insisted on walking. Said it was good to blend in. As if a man who looks like he stepped out of a high-end catalog could ever blend into anything. The four of us wandered along the waterfront. The breeze, soft and salty, sunlight catching on the water like glitter scattered by accident. Raphael carried my daughter's bag without being asked, helped her up when she tripped, and even tied her shoelace with a kind of awkward sincerity that made my heart ache a little. "This place," he said quietly as we passed the old market, "reminds me of summer." "You grew up near here?" I asked. "No, Manhattan. But once when I was a kid, we came down to visit a friend of my father's. I remember the humidity, the smell of the ocean, and a pecan pie that changed my life." I smiled. "That's oddly specific." I don't remember much else about that trip, just the pie and feeling small in a place that felt too big for me. It was strange hearing that from him. Raphael Vaughan never seemed small. He was larger than life, loud, powerful, confident. But in that moment, he looked like someone who once got lost in a crowd and never forgot how it felt. He bought the kids extra scoops without blinking at the sugar crash risk. And when my son accidentally spilled his cone on a stranger's purse, Raphael stepped in, apologized, offered to pay for the dry cleaning, and somehow charmed the woman into forgiving the entire incident with a laugh. I stood there watching him. Not as my boss, not as the man who kissed me out of convenience, just as a man. And he wasn't bad at it. That night, back at the house, the kids fell asleep early. Son drunk and sticky from ice cream. I stepped out onto the porch, wine in hand, and found Raphael already there. He didn't say anything, just offered me the other chair. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that feels earned, not awkward, the kind that lets you breathe. "You're good with them," I said eventually. "I didn't expect to be," he admitted. "I didn't think they'd like me." I looked over at him, illuminated by the soft porch light. His expression was unreadable. Serious, but not closed off. "They don't like you," I said. "They trust you. That's different." He turned his head toward me, surprised. I didn't give him time to process it. I stood up, stretched, and said goodnight. But as I reached the door, I heard him say almost too quietly, "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't turn around. But in that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared before. I wasn't just pretending anymore. I was noticing. And that was so much more dangerous. There's a moment in every lie when it stops being clever and starts being exhausting. It sneaks up on you, like the end of a vacation or the first signs of a cold. You ignore it at first, pretend you can push through it, but it's there beneath every smile, every half-truth, every moment that feels just a little too good to be safe. For us, it arrived on a Tuesday. The morning started like any other. Quiet laughter over breakfast, Raphael pretending he could scramble eggs without burning them, the kids teasing him mercilessly. I should have known it wouldn't last because he showed up. My ex-husband. He had the audacity to appear unannounced at the house. All polished charm and false concern. I was in the area, he said, which was a lie so transparent I almost applauded the effort. The kids mentioned they were here with you, and I thought I'd stop by just to see how they were doing. Raphael stood behind me, arms crossed, expression unreadable. My children were thrilled, of course. They still carried the illusion that their father was a consistent presence rather than an occasional visitor in expensive shoes. We let him inside because what else could I do? Slam the door and prove him right? He looked around the house like it was a showroom. Nice place, he said, very curated. Raphael didn't respond, but I saw his jaw tighten. The kids dragged their father to the backyard, excited to show him the rope swing Raphael had installed the day before. And suddenly I was alone in the kitchen with Raphael. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Not like the man who kissed me to sell a lie or who carried my daughter's backpack like it weighed nothing. He looked like someone trying not to ask a question he didn't want answered. You didn't mention he was in town, he said finally. I didn't know, I replied. But you talk right about the kids. I turned defensive without meaning to be. Not everything revolves around you, Raphael. Sometimes people just show up. He nodded slowly. Too slowly. So, are you too close? There it was. The question. The possessive jealousy of a man who had no right to it. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're kidding, right? You think I'm hiding something? You who faked an entire ex-marriage to impress a woman who doesn't even know your middle name? His voice dropped. That was different. How? Because you were supposed to be just part of a story. Not this. The word hung between us, undefined and dangerous. Not this. Not a woman he shared mornings with. Not a life he slipped into too easily. Not a truth he didn't mean to feel. I stared at him, all the quiet unraveling between us. Every look, every soft moment, every accidental kindness suddenly held under a microscope. This is your story, I said softly. I was just playing my role. He didn't respond. Outside, I could hear my daughter laughing, my son shouting, instructions at the swing like it was a spaceship. I stepped back just slightly. Enough to say, this is where I end. I need air, and left. I walked through Charleston streets like a woman who didn't belong anywhere. Everything around me looked too beautiful to hold the kind of ache I was carrying. The pastel houses, the flowering balconies, the distant sound of a violin from a street performer who didn't know he was soundtracking heartbreak. I found a bench under an oak tree and sat there for a long time, thinking about what it means to be seen. Not admired, not needed, but seen. Raphael made me visible. Not because he loved me, but because for a moment I fit into his version of the truth, and now that truth was cracking. Later that evening, when I returned to the house, the lights were dimmed. The kids were asleep. Raphael was gone. Just a note on the kitchen table, written in his perfect, efficient handwriting. Needed space. Back tomorrow. Don't worry about dinner. I stared at it for a long time. Then folded it in half and threw it away. Not out of anger, but because I was done holding on to things that didn't want to stay. Raphael came back the next morning. No grand gesture, no apology. Just the sound of the door opening quietly and the smell of strong coffee floating through the house like a peace offering. I was already awake, had been since 5:30, lying in bed, trying not to replay every word of our fight. But of course, I did because women like me always rehearse the exit even when we're still in the room. He didn't say anything at first, just set a mug beside me at the kitchen table and sat down across from me. The silence stretched. It wasn't angry anymore, just tired. I wasn't jealous, he said finally, looking at his hands. I raised an eyebrow. I mean, I was, he corrected himself. But not of him. I was jealous that he knew you before. That he got to be there in the version of your life I'll never see. That caught me off guard. You think he got the best version of me? I asked, trying not to sound bitter. I think he got the first version, Raphael said. But this version you are now, she's not easy to ignore. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever said something like that to me, not even my ex. Especially not him. He leaned back, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm not used to being this off balance. I gave a small laugh. Welcome to the rest of us. We sat there, two people who were supposed to be pretending, and suddenly everything felt a little too real, like we'd slipped out of the script and into something honest, and no one had yelled, "Cut." Later that day, the kids convinced us to go to the park. Raphael said he had work to catch up on. I told him not to worry, but he showed up anyway in jeans and a t-shirt, holding 2 paper cups of juice and a Ziploc bag full of cookies he clearly didn't bake. Bribery, he said, handing them to the kids. It works better than lectures. My son gave him a nod of approval. My daughter high-fived him like he'd passed some secret test. And somehow, we ended up sitting on a bench together, watching them play like we'd done this before, like this was just what we did, you know? They like you, I said quietly. I like them, too, he said. That surprised me. I never wanted kids, he added. I thought I'd be terrible at it. Still kind of do, but they don't seem to care. They don't, I agreed. They just want someone who shows up. We sat in silence again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was soft, comfortable, like a space we could rest in. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you ever think about going back? Back to medicine as a doctor? I mean, you have the degree, the residency. You could have gone so far." It stunned me that he remembered. Most people forget that I used to be more than someone who managed their calendar. I used to, I said honestly. But life got complicated. The kids needed me. I needed stability. And you needed a secretary. He looked at me then, really looked. Helena, I didn't need a secretary. I needed you. I just didn't realize it until I almost ruined everything. My throat tightened. Not because it was romantic, but because it was true, and it was the first true thing he'd said that had nothing to do with performance or ego. Just then, my daughter ran over with grass in her hair and dirt on her knees. We're playing superhero hospital. Raphael, you're the doctor. Mom, you're the patient. You have 12 minutes to live. I laughed. Well, that escalated quickly. Raphael gave a dramatic gasp. Don't worry, ma'am. I'm the best. He grabbed a twig, pretended it was a scalpel, and knelt beside me like we were on an episode of the most unhinged medical drama ever made. My daughter beamed like she was directing the whole thing. And in that moment, I saw it. Not just Raphael, the surgeon, or Raphael, the liar, but Raphael, the man. The man who could make my kids laugh, who remembered how I take my coffee, who stayed when he didn't have to. And for the first time since this ridiculous charade began, I wanted it to keep going. Not for the trip, not for the lie, but because maybe, just maybe, we weren't pretending anymore. We stayed an extra day. It wasn't planned. But when the kids begged and Raphael looked at me like maybe we're not ready to leave yet, I didn't argue. The house by the water had started to feel less like a vacation and more like a pause in time. A fragile little bubble where no one had to pretend anymore. We spent the day doing nothing. The kind of nothing you only get with people who make you feel safe. Card games, lazy meals, books half-read and forgotten on couches. I caught Raphael reading to my daughter once, her head on his shoulder, his voice softer than I'd ever heard. Yet, I didn't say anything, but something inside me cracked. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, and the house had quieted into that perfect Charleston stillness, warm breeze through the windows, the slow hum of crickets in the distance, I found him on the porch. He was sitting alone, elbows on his knees, staring at the dark water beyond the trees like it had answers he couldn't find. "I thought you'd be asleep," he said, not turning around. "I could say the same to you," I replied, easing into the chair beside him. We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "I've been thinking about how this started." I didn't respond, just waited. I lied to impress someone. That part one knew. What I didn't realize is that the moment I asked you to help me, I was already trying to impress you. I looked at him startled. "What?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. "I didn't know it then. I thought it was convenience. But every time you looked at me like I was being ridiculous, every time you called me out without flinching, I felt seen and not in the way I usually am." "That sounds dangerously close to vulnerability," I said, trying to lighten the moment. But he didn't laugh. "I'm not good at this," he admitted. "I've dated women who fit into my schedule, who never asked for anything real. I thought that was safer. I didn't want to be known because once someone knows you, they can leave, or worse, stay and not love you anyway. I didn't expect that. Not from him." I swallowed, my voice quieter now. "And what do you think is happening now?" He turned to me then. Finally, his eyes weren't distant. They weren't calculating. They were tired, raw. "I think I'm in love with someone who wasn't supposed to matter," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying and beautiful. I didn't say anything because I didn't know how to believe him. "I know this wasn't real," he continued. "I know I asked you to play a part, but you didn't just act, Helena. You showed up. You handled my chaos, my ego, my lies, and still found time to teach my daughter how to braid her hair and make my son feel like he was worth listening to." I blinked quickly. The breeze was warm, but my hands were cold. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "Not a ring, not yet. A key. To my place," he said. "In case you ever want to use the espresso machine you keep glaring at during meetings, or take a nap on a couch you didn't pay for, or maybe think about what it would be like if we stopped pretending." I stared at it, then at him. "You don't even know if I want to date you," I said, almost laughing through the lump in my throat. "I don't want to date you," he said. "I want to build something with you. With your kids, with your sarcasm, with your mornings and your tired eyes and your 1,000 lists. I want all of it. The messy, the late, the real." My eyes were full now. Not with fairy tale dreams, but with something harder, something earned. "You're going to make this complicated, aren't you?" I whispered. He smiled. "Not the polished one, the real one. I've already made it impossible." I took the key. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. And maybe that was enough for now because, for the first time since this began, there were no scripts left, only choices. And I was ready to make one. 2 weeks later, he called and said, "I want to show you something." Not, "We need to talk." Not, "Can you come by?" Not even, "I miss you." Just that. "I want to show you something." I agreed. Not because I was sure, but because sometimes you say yes before your fear has time to answer. He picked me up just before sunset. No driver, no suit, just jeans, a button-down shirt, and that uncertain look he wore only around me. He drove us out past the city. The streets grew quieter. The light turned gold. The air changed, slower, softer. We ended up at a small house by the marsh, tucked between trees and water, like it had been waiting to be found. It wasn't huge. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. "This is mine," he said, stepping out of the car. I blinked. "You bought a house?" "I built a house," he corrected gently. "Years ago, I never used it. It was supposed to be a vacation home, but I didn't know how to rest." I followed him to the back porch where 2 wooden chairs waited. The view opened wide. Sky, water, trees tangled with Spanish moss, everything quiet, everything breathing. "I thought you'd like it," he said. "It reminds me of you." I turned to him overwhelmingly calm and underappreciated. He smiled. "Exactly." We sat there for a while in silence. He didn't rush it. And maybe that was the most romantic thing he'd done. Finally, he spoke. "I haven't stopped thinking about you, about the kids, about the way the house felt when you were all there. It wasn't just comfortable. It was alive." I looked at him, and this time I didn't need to be cautious. "Are you sure, Raphael? Because this isn't glamorous. It's messy. It's school drop-offs and sticky hands and bedtime stories that go too long. It's real and it's mine." "I want yours," he said. "All of it." I stood up, walked to the railing, felt the wind brushing my skin. He followed. "I love you, Helena," he said. "Not because it's convenient. Not because you helped me out of a lie. I love you because when everything is quiet, you're still the thing I hear." My heart did that annoying thing. That uneven skip it hadn't done in years. Not since I gave up on love stories and started budgeting for groceries like it was a war strategy. But this was something else. "Do the kids know we're here?" I asked, still teasing, still terrified. "They're with my sister. She's already asking what they want for breakfast. I think she's afraid of them." "Smart woman." He reached for my hand. "No dramatics. Just warmth. Steady and sure." "I don't need an answer now," he said. "Yes, you do," I said. "You always do. You hate loose ends." He waited. I looked at him. Really looked. This man who used to live in a world of surface-level beauty, now standing in front of me with open eyes and no armor. "I love you too," I said. "Even though you're ridiculous, even though you panic and deflect and pretend your espresso machine is a personality." His laugh was soft. Grateful. "Helena Andrade," he said. "Will you give me a chance to love you for real?" I stepped closer, placed my hands on his chest. "You already are." We didn't kiss like the movies. No music swelled. No birds flew dramatically across the sky. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of kiss that felt like coming home. Later, we sat on the porch and made a list because, of course, we did. He would take them to school on Fridays. I would not pretend I liked his terrible jazz playlist. He would learn to cook at least one dinner that didn't involve reservations. I would stop rolling my eyes when he used the phrase, brand alignment. We were not perfect, but we were real. And that was enough. It always had been.